ॐ दक्षिणस्य समारम्भा शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमा अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ता स्मर्या गुरुपरम्परा श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणम् सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशववामन कृष्ण पाण्डुरङ्ग आनन्द परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शङ्कर सद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. With this great initiative by our Parama Pujya Sadyojata Shankarashram Swamiji and our entire Guru Parampara with their blessings, I have been, given this very, very pleasant task of presenting Bhagavad Gita in the coming weeks. And what I want to say here is that I'm not going to take this Bhagavad Gita sessions just for telling the translation and transliteration of the verses and just explain them as to what they mean. That will not be the way it is going to be explained here. I'm going to talk about the entire vision of the Bhagavad Gita that is unfolded in each and every verse of Bhagavad Gita. And the vision of Bhagavad Gita is such that, every verse is connected to the next verse. Every chapter is connected to the next chapter. This beautiful Sangati or this beautiful connection which is there between every verse and every chapter actually makes it very easy for us to understand the vision of Bhagavad Gita. And the study of Bhagavad Gita becomes much more interesting and more fruitful when we try to see the whole vision of Bhagavad Gita and when we see what is it that the central or the core teaching of each verse is, rather than merely understanding the verbal meaning or the sentential meaning or the transliteration of every verse. That may not give us that kind of a total insight into what Bhagavad Gita talks about. Now, what is Bhagavad Gita? Now, Gita means Gitam is a song. Bhagavat Gita means Bhagavatah Gitam or Bhagavata Gitam. Now, that which is Bhagavan's song, Bhagavan Krishna's song, Bhagavatah Gitam, or that which was sung by Bhagavan, Bhagavata Gitam. Now, how Bhagavata Gitam became Bhagavad Gita is a point of grammatical vyutpatti, which we are not going to discuss because it's not very relevant to us. But let us understand that this is a song of Lord Krishna. Now, it seems very, strange that, we all know that Bhagavad Gita was, the words of Lord Krishna as an avatar of Bhagavan Narayana himself. And this was taught, this knowledge was taught, or these words of knowledge were given to Arjuna in the battlefield of Mahabharata Yuddha. And when Krishna is talking this knowledge or giving this knowledge to Arjuna, how can Bhagavan be singing this song? Is it relevant to call it Bhagavan's song? Now it is called Bhagavan's song because the way it has been compiled, the way it has been presented by Bhagavan Vyasacharya. You see, though the words were of Lord Krishna, the words of Lord Krishna were actually compiled and they were literally composed into a poem. Bhagavad Gita can be literally compared to a poem, and it is like a song from the very first verse to the last verse. See, in a song, we find that there is a connection between every word, a connection between the two lines, the Pallavi, the Anupallavi, the stanzas. Everything in a song is beautifully connected and composed. And that is what Bhagwan Vyasacharya did. He literally compiled and composed the words of Bhagavan Krishna into this kind of a lyrical or a poetic expression of Bhagavad Gita. That's why Bhagavad Gita is a pleasure to chant also, very easy and pleasure to chant. And Vyasacharya not only composed Bhagwan's words into this kind of a very chanda baddha poem like, but also Bhagavan Vyasa presented this entire teaching of Krishna in such a way that it becomes very simple for us to chant and very simple for us to even understand what is meant by what really were Krishna's words. Now, whether Krishna really talked in that order itself or not, we don't know. But whatever Lord Krishna talked, very, very faithfully, Bhagwan Vyasa represented, collected, and compiled the whole thing and presented it in such a form that it becomes like a song which can be enjoyed and understood and assimilated in a very, very simple manner. You know, Bhagavan Krishna gave this knowledge in the battlefield to Arjuna, and this Mahabharata Yuddha comes in the portion called as the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata. Now, the same Bhishma Parva says that Gita Sugita Kartavya Kim Anyaihi Shastra Vistaraihi. It says the same Bhishma Parva Mahabharata. Vyasa is again the creator or composer of Mahabharata, and Vyasa says if one has understood the Tatparyam of Bhagavad Gita, if one has studied the Gita very well, Sugita Kartavya, then Kim Anyaihi Shastra Vistaraihi. What is the need for any other Shastra? There is no need for any other Shastra at all. Now, we have to understand one thing. What is the meaning of this Shastra? We'll be using this term Shastra very often till the end of Bhagavad Gita of 700 verses and 18 chapters. What is the meaning of this Shastra? Shastra primarily means a body of knowledge. It's a body of knowledge. And in our Sanatana Dharma scriptures or in Sanatana Dharma, the Shastra is talked about in two ways basically. That is the primary body of knowledge or the primary source of knowledge which came from the Lord, from Brahman or Parameshwara itself at the beginning of a creation. In the beginning of every creation, as the creation appears, the Vedas are also coming along with creation. And therefore, the Vedas are nothing but the Shastras. Our Shastras, the primary body of knowledge or the Shastra, is the first thing we have to understand is that it is in the form of Vedas. And what are these Vedas? Veda is the Shastra or the body of knowledge which came from Parameshwara itself at the time of creation. It was perceived by the rishis or called the drishtaras or rishis, and this knowledge was in the form of various mantras which were received. The mantras were received by these rishis, and then these mantras were transferred down by Karana Vidya, Shravana Vidya to the generations, the forthcoming generations. And this is how the body of knowledge called as the Vedas was conveyed. It went on in a flow called as a pravaha nityatvam. It was a nitya jnanam. It was something which was in a pravaha. As a pravaha nityatvam, it kept on coming down from generation to generation. And initially, when the rishis received this knowledge, what we call as Vedas, it was received in the form of a jumbled up of various mantras. And it is our Bhagavan Vyasacharya who actually divided, segregated, and codified this entire body of knowledge called Vedas into four divisions and made it possible for this knowledge to be very easily transferred through the Guru Shishya Parampara to the generations to come. And even today, we are having the same Parampara Prapta Veda Jnanam, or Veda in the form of the various mantras divided into four kinds of four Vedas under four heads. We'll not go much into the details of the Vedas, but then let us know that these Vedas are the primary body of knowledge. Number one, they are apaurushaya. What is the meaning of apaurushaya? They are not the products of any human intellect. The Vedas were not written or created by any human intellect, but they were received as such as Bhagavan's manifestation. It manifested this knowledge along with the creation, merely received by intelligent minds prepared to receive this knowledge. So, number one, it was Apaurushaya. And Vedas are having that knowledge which is relevant to all the human beings in the society. For example, the Vedas have been divided into two parts. That is the Veda Purva, which is also called as the Karma Kanda, and Vedanta, or which is called as the Jnana Kanda. Now, why are these two parts there in the Vedas, which are our primary scriptures? Why do we have it? It is because as we are, as human beings are, the pursuit of a common individual, a common person, a common human being is dharma, artha, and kama. What is the meaning of dharma? Accumulating enough punya and merit, or doing good deeds so that one accumulates punya sufficient enough to enjoy a good, living in this life and enjoy a good loka after this life after. So this is what is called as dharma, basically with the view of accumulating punya. Then we have artha. Artha is what? Security. Security in the form of materials. It may be money, it may be property, it may be children, it may be family, anything. Any resource which gives me that feeling of security is called as artha. And kama. Every individual has certain inherent and certain developed kamas or desires which he wants to fulfill. So most of us, most of the humanity is in the pursuit of dharma, artha, and kama purusharthas. These human pursuits are called as purusharthas. And dharma, artha, kama purusharthas are the most common purusharthas pursued by most of the humanity. And this is called as the preyas or the preyo marga. And those who are after the dharma, artha, kama purusharthas are called as the preyorthis. And the first part of the Vedas, or the Veda Purva or Karma Kanda of the Vedas, cater to these three purusharthas. There's nothing wrong in these purusharthas, but what Vedas, the Karma Kanda of Vedas says is that you follow this particular system. I will tell you how to dharmically, attain all the desires that you have, to attain whatever you want in the field of dharma, artha, and kama. This is the function, or this is the context of the Veda Purva. Then we have Vedanta, where the context of Vedanta is providing or reaching out to a person who has understood the futility of dharma, artha, kama, and he wants to pursue something which is something higher than these three purusharthas, and which gives him that everlasting, permanent security, peace, and happiness. That means these are people who are in search of freedom from bondage, freedom from even dharma, artha, kamas, and they're looking for that something which is going to give them a total sense of peace, security, and happiness, which is called as moksha purushartha. Moksha means freedom. Freedom from what? The bandha or the samsara right now I'm facing. And a person who is interested and pursuing this Purushartha is called as a Shreyorthi. It is a Shreya Marga. Shreyas or Shreyo Marga. The person who is desirous of this Shreyo Marga is called as a Shreyorthi. And the person who is interested and wants, desires moksha as his goal is called as a Mumukshu. Moktum Ichha is Mumuksha. Moktum Ichuhu, the one who is interested in this moksha, is called as Mumukshu. Therefore, the Vedas cater to a Dharma, Artha, Kama, Purushartha, for the person who is interested in that is the Arthi, the Purusha, the one who wants to fulfill these Purusharthas. At the same time, a Mumukshu is also catered to by the Jnana Kanda or the Upanishads. So now let us, this should be enough for talking about basically the primary body of knowledge called as the Vedas. Now we have another level of Shastra. So we are now discussing the Shastra, the types, or how we can divide our entire knowledge base of Sanatana Dharma, the primary source of knowledge, which we called as Vedas. Now we have the next level of knowledge, a body of knowledge called as Smriti. As I said, Vedas were called as Shruti because they were heard, they were passed down the generations by the Guru Shishya Parampara through the Shravana Vidya. There was nothing writing or anything. It had to be heard, remembered, and passed on to the next generation. Therefore, the Vedas are also called as the Shruti. And the next level of Shastras, or the next aspect of Shastras, is what is called as Smriti. What is Smriti? Smriti is something which is a creation of a human intellect. There is an author who has created a work or a body of knowledge which is entirely based on the Vedas. The Smriti is totally based on the Shruti. The Smriti does not talk anything independently of itself, but has its basis, has its pramana in the primary body of knowledge called as the Vedas. And this is called as Smriti. Now, Smriti is not a Paurusheya, it is Paurusheya. Paurusheya means what? A particular human being out of his own intellect, prepared intellect, has created a work of, a body of knowledge based on the Shruti at a particular point in time, in a particular context, for a particular reason. This is called as Smriti. Smriti Granthas are also very, very important bodies of knowledge for a Mumukshu. The two basic, most important Smriti Granthas we have are Bhagavad Gita and Brahma Sutras. And Bhagavan Veda Vyasa is the composer of both of them. That is, he composed or he wrote Brahma Sutra, which is a work of Vyasacharya. Whereas Bhagavad Gita, though it is a Smriti, though Bhagavan Vyasacharya is credited with the authorship of Bhagavad Gita, actually speaking, we cannot say Bhagavan Vedavyasa is the author of it. He's only a compiler. He made a compendium or a compilation of what Lord Krishna spoke. Therefore, though Vyasa is the Granthakara of Brahma Sutras, actually he's not the Granthakara, but he's only a compiler of Bhagwan's words in Bhagavad Gita. And the three, that is, the Vedanta part of the Shruti. I said that the Vedas have two parts, Veda Purva and Vedanta. And Vedanta or Jnana Kanda, which is also called as Upanishads. The Upanishads of the Vedas, the Jnana Kanda, the Bhagavad Gita, the Smriti, and the Brahma Sutras, which is also the Smriti. These three are called as the Prasthana Trayas. And for a Mumukshu, the Prasthanatraya Adhyayanam is the most important aspect of reaching or attaining that goal of Purushartha called as the Moksha Purushartha. Now let us understand what is Prasthana. Prasthana generally is meant Marga. That means it's a path. It's a path, moksha is a path which has to go through these three. One has to study the Prasthanatraya, that is the two Smriti Granthas, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras, and the Vedanta or Upanishads. Now, Prasthanatraya has other meanings also. One more meaning of Prasthana is, coming back from somewhere where we are already there. Withdrawing from something is also called Prasthana. Entering into something is also called Prasthana. Now, for a mumukshu who has realized the futility of dharma, artha, kama in the form of the limitations or the limitedness of dharma, artha, kamas, this mumukshu wants to withdraw from dharma, artha, kama, purusharthas, prasthana, and wants to enter into the moksha purushartha, prasthana into the moksha purushartha. So, for such a mumukshu, withdrawing from the dharmartha, kama, purusharthas is also made available by the Prasthanatraya, and also entering the Prasthana into Moksha Purushartha is also made feasible by the Prasthanatraya. Therefore, we have this Prasthanatraya Granthas, these three, that is Vedanta, which contains Upanishads. We'll not go into lot of details about this because our main now topic centered is Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is one of the most important Smriti Granthas, which is a very, very important part of Prasthanatraya. And Bhagavad Gita actually is the easiest of the three because the way it has been given to a person like Arjuna, who's something like us by Lord Krishna, and the way it has been compiled by Vyasacharya has made this Bhagavad Gita such an interesting way of exposing oneself to the higher knowledge of, Vedanta and Brahma Sutras. And though, Bhagavad Gita, it is the important aspect of Prasthanatraya, it is basically a moksha shastra. It is having its prominence, predominance in moksha shastra, but Bhagavad Gita also deals with many other aspects of human life, like karma it deals with, karma yoga it deals with, upasana it deals with, upasana yoga it deals with, pranayama it deals with, ashtanga yoga it deals with, values to be followed it deals with. So Bhagavad Gita is like a big akara which contains everything that is needed for everybody. But at the same time, the core message of Bhagavad Gita is actually moksha. How one can withdraw himself or herself from the the preyo marga and enter into the shreyo marga. Now let us see what is the context of Bhagavad Gita and what is the relevance of this Bhagavad Gita. Now, as we have already seen, the context of Bhagavad Gita is that this happened in the Mahabharata war, and why should such an exposition of knowledge happen in such a Vishama Paristhiti? Vishama Paristhiti means some paristhiti or some situation which is most unexpected. Why should it happen? Here, this is the state where Arjuna, who has been preparing for this Mahabharata Yuddha for the past 13 years during his Vanavasa and Ajnatavasa, when he really gets into the battlefield and when he sees or inspects the entire army which is gathered there, his own army and the enemy army, those who are ready to fight, there is some kind of a, change in the way he looks at the whole situation. And suddenly Arjuna is overcome by Vishada or sorrow and also confusion. So Arjuna is totally confused about what should be done, what should not be done. What is dharma here? What is adharma here? What, should I fight this war? Should I not fight this war? So Arjuna is a helpless creature, a helpless being who's afflicted by moha, confusion, and shoka. What is shoka? Emotional pain, mental pain is called as shoka, whereas a physical pain is called as a dukkha. He is afflicted by this mental pain of shoka because of moha and helplessness. And Arjuna himself describes his state in the first part of the second chapter. He says, Dharma Samuda Chetasa. Dharma Samuda Chetasa Ahamasmi. He is a Dharma Samuda Chetasa. That means, what is adharma? What is dharma here? What should I do? What should I not do? I'm confused. He is a picture of confusion, and that is giving him, leading to sorrow and helplessness. And this helplessness, Bhagwan expresses in Arjuna's words as karpanya. What is karpanya? Helplessness, kripanata. Who is a kripana? When I have enough of resources and I don't use those resources to enjoy myself, nor do I share it with others, it is of no use to me or to others. Such a person is called as a miser or a kripana. And Arjuna calls himself a kripana. Why? Now, Bhagavan has given us this free will. Bhagavan has given us this capacity to think, make decisions, have an intellect which can be discriminative, and it can make nishchayas. It can think of the right way of action. All these resources are given to us. But in a situation like this particular buddhi is not available. This free will is not available to Arjuna. And though it is there, it is of no use to him. This is the state of kripanata or karpanya, which we all face. We all face the situations in life where, though we have the intellect capable of making decisions, the situation is such that this buddhi is of no use to us, and we feel a state of helplessness and dharma samuda, karma samuda, all kinds of confusion are there. And Arjuna is representing the very prototype of all the shishas, all of us. And Bhagavan Krishna here is presented by Vyasacharya not only as the Guru to Arjuna, but also in the form of Guru to Arjuna. Krishna becomes the Jagat Guru. And in this context of the war, what is Krishna's state in which Krishna is giving out this knowledge? It is said that he is Yogeshwara Krishna. He is in that yoga, abiding in jnana yoga, in that knowledge, the very knowledge itself. Krishna is giving out this knowledge, Yogeshwara Krishna. In that state, Krishna is giving out this knowledge. Therefore, there is an interesting story that at the, after 30 years of Bhagavad Gita, it seems Arjuna asks Krishna again, Krishna, I have forgotten whatever you have taught me in the battlefield. Can you teach me again? And Krishna says, it is not possible for me to repeat, because when I gave that knowledge to you in the battlefield, I was abiding in yoga. I was the Yogeshwara Krishna. In that state of yoga, I gave it to you. I was absolute Jnana Swarupa that time. I was not Krishna. And now today you ask me to repeat that. That is not possible. I will give you that knowledge again, but it will never be that which I have given you in that battlefield. And then we have the second version of this called as Anugita, which is not as popular and as beautiful as the main Bhagavad Gita is. And what is the relevance of this Bhagavad Gita? Now, Bhagavad Gita is not relevant only at the time of Mahabharata Yuddha, only to Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita is relevant to every human being in every yuga, at all times, in all situations, because as human beings, we are facing Arjuna's state in most of our daily lives in situations of crisis. What has been depicted in the form of Arjuna as the Shishya, Bhagavan Krishna as the Guru, and the war situation as the context is applicable to all of us. And we are all Arjunas facing similar situations, warlike situations. And Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's words are relevant in every yuga, at every time, in every place, to everybody. And therefore, the relevance of Bhagavad Gita is something which is universal. It is something which is for everybody. It is not like, say, oh, is that big? Somebody asked me once, Bhagavad Gita, oh, is it that some Krishna, Arjuna, something they talked in war? I said, no, it is not something that they both talked in war. It is something which is relevant at all times during this entire, kind of the time period of this creation. It is relevant to all of us at all the times. And because all of us are afflicted by Shoka, Moha, and Karpanya. And getting out of this Shoka, Moha, Karpanya and finding ourselves to be in our Atmaswarupa is actually the very message of Bhagavad Gita, which is relevant to all people at all time. Now, let us go to the next aspect of why is Bhagavad Gita called as Smriti. Smriti because it contains the saram or the artha, or it is the central teaching of the entire Vedas. And not only that, when Smriti presents, a particular body of knowledge, when a writer presents a Smriti Grantha, there are four things that a Smriti Grantha has to give, in the beginning as an introduction, called as the Anubandha Chatushtaya. Anubandha Chatushtaya means there are four things which are introduced. When a body of knowledge is given in the form of a Shruti, a Paurushaya Grantha written by a particular author at a particular time for a particular purpose in a particular context, he gives four things. First, number one, what is the content or the Vishaya of this particular Grantha? And it is said that the Vishaya of Bhagavad Gita is predominantly moksha, moksha shastra, Atmagnana, Brahmagnana, Brahmavidya. That is why at the end of each chapter, it is Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su Upanishatsu Brahmavidyayam Yoga Shastre. It may contain so many other things like Dharma, so as I said some time back. But then the main thing that is there, the content of Bhagavad Gita is Moksha Shastra. Therefore, that is the Vishaya predominantly. It is the Vishaya of Bhagavad Gita. Secondly, who is the Adhikari? First is the Vishaya in the Anubandha Chatushtaya. Second is the Adhikari. Who's an Adhikari? Anybody who has started questioning what is this life? What is my purpose here? Why am I born? What is ultimately my goal? Is simply being born and doing certain things in one's life, going after dharma, artha, kama, purusharthas, coming back again and again. Is this my life, or is there something more than this? When a person starts questioning, when a person becomes a mumukshu, when a person wants to have prasthana from dharma, artha, kama, preyo marga and enter into the prasthana of shreyo marga of moksha, such a mumukshu is the adhikari for this knowledge. So Vishaya, Adhikari. What is the phalam? The third thing is phalam. Phalam, what can it be? Moksha Shastra's phalam is what? Nothing short of moksha. Of course, there are in-between goals, intermediate goals also Krishna talks about in the form of Chitta Shuddhi, in the form of Chitta Naishchalyam. So many intermediate goals are also talked about. But the ultimate phalam of Gita Jnanam is nothing but it is moksha, nothing short of moksha. Last one in Anubandha Chatushtaya, the Sambandha. The Sambandha between the Vishaya, the Sambandha between the Vishaya and the Phala. This is what is called as the Sambandha. That means how is the content of the Vishaya connected to the Phalam of this particular Grantha. Okay, so what is that? This is the means. The study of this Shastra is the means for that particular goal called as moksha. So it has got a sadhana, sadhya, sambandha. Sadhana, Bhagavad Gita is used in its various ways, the way Krishna gives the sadhana. Every step that Krishna gives is a sadhana for the sadhya, which is the next step. And the ultimate thing that I get is moksha, where I understand that I am that siddha, moksha, swarupa, atma, ahamasmi. Don't worry about these things. It will all be given out later and we'll understand it step by step. So this is the Anubandha Chatushtaya, and very, very, very clearly it has been talked about in these four ways only. Bhagavad Gita as a Smriti Grantha falls into this Anubandha Chatushraya as I described it to you now. Now, why is Bhagavad Gita called as Moksha Shastra? That is also very important for us to know. Is Bhagavad Gita a Moksha Shastra? Yes. So many other things are also discussed in this. Yes. Dharma, Niti, Pranayama is discussed. Yoga is discussed. Ashtanga Yoga is discussed. So many things are discussed in Bhagavad Gita. But this ultimate thing or the ultimate goal or the core teaching of Bhagavad Gita is Moksha Shastra. And Bhagavad Gita is ultimately the Upanishad Saraha, Sarva Upanishad Saraha, Sarva Vedanta Saraha. So it is actually the Vedartha, Vedanta Artha, Vedanta Samanvaya, the vision of the Vedas ultimately is what is called as Bhagavad Gita. Now, how do you, justify this? How do you say that Bhagavad Gita is the Moksha Shastra? Why is it called as an Upanishad? Iti Bhagavad Gita su Upanishadsu. Actually, Bhagavad Gita is also called as Gita Upanishad. Gita Upanishad, it said it because it is, the saram of all the Upanishad. Actually, Lord Krishna depends heavily on the Upanishadic statements. Some of the verses, some of the shlokas of Bhagavad Gita are bodily lifted from Kathopanishad. Kathopanishad is the main Upanishad on which Krishna is depending, or Krishna is actually basing his teaching to Arjuna on. Now we should understand why is Bhagavad Gita is equaled to an Upanishad or Moksha Shastra. Now Moksha Shastra, anything Upanishad or any Moksha Shastra or any Smriti Grantha which calls itself a Moksha Shastra, deals with moksha, has to deal with 6 things. No, don't worry about this because we are talking about introduction of Bhagavad Gita. All these things have to be talked about. And if you listen to this again and again and again, you'll understand the beauty of it. Now, a moksha grantha, a moksha shastra or Upanishad, always, every Upanishad deals with the 6 following things. Number 1, Jiva Swarupa. Jiva Swarupa. What am I as a Jiva? No, what is my understanding of myself now? The way I understand myself, is it the right understanding or is it the wrong understanding? What is my real nature? Am I this body, mind, sense complex, or am I something else? What is the vision that the Vedas have, the Upanishads have about my real nature, which I don't know? I'm confused. So, Upanishads, Moksha Shastra talks about Jiva Swarupa. Then, Jagat Swarupa. As a Jiva, I'm interacting with the other Jivas. I'm interacting with the Jagat around me. What is this Jagat? Is Jagat really the way I look at it? Or is the Jagat something different than what I think of it? Why is the Jagat binding me so much? Why does the Jagat have so much of an influence on me? Why am I caught in this influence of this Jagat? What is this Jagat? I do not know the Swarupam of this Jagat. Upanishads explain to me this Swarupam of Jagat. Jiva Swarupa, Jagat Swarupa. Then, if there is a Jiva and Jivas like me, millions, and there is a Jagat with which I interact, there should be a controller of the Jiva and Jagat so that the transaction between the Jivas and the Jagat goes on smoothly. And that controlling agency is called as Ishvara. So, Ishvara Swarupam. What is this Ishvara? Is it Ishvara in the form of Rama, Krishna, or Devi, or whatever it is? Is it so? Or what is really the nature of Ishvara? So, Jiva Swarupa, Jagat Swarupa, Ishvara Swarupa, and then I'm feeling bound, I'm feeling limited, I'm feeling that I'm not really able to reach my full potential. I feel constantly a sense of bondage or bandha. What is this bandha? Is this bandha really there? Or this bandha is something which is superimposed, imagined by me? What is this bandha? What is the nature of this bandha? This is the 4th thing that is discussed in the Upanishadic text, any Upanishadic text. Then, if there is a bandha that I'm feeling, I want to get free from that bandha. And I call it moksha. Now, what is this moksha? Is this moksha something to be attained? Is moksha something somewhere there where I have to go there and attain it? Is it something which an object which has to be acquired by me? What is this moksha? Is it something to be understood? Is it something to be acquired? Is it something to be run after? Is it something to be kept as a goal? What is this moksha? What is this freedom? What is this bondage? What is this freedom? Moksha Rupa. So, Moksha Swarupa, what is this moksha? And lastly, if I'm feeling bound as a bandha, I am feeling this, this bondage, and I want moksha, then there must be a sadhana for that, isn't it? Therefore, the Upanishads also talk about the means to get free from this bandha and understand what moksha is. So, the sadhanas that are necessary, the means that are necessary to understand all these things. All these six are integral parts of Upanishadic texts or any Smriti Grantha which is dealing with primarily with Moksha Shastra. These six have to be there, and all the six are there in Bhagavad Gita. Not only that, an Upanishad is always a samvada, a dialogue between a teacher, an acharya, and the shishya. There may be one acharya and one shishya. There may be one acharya and many shishyas. There may be many acharyas and one shishya. Doesn't matter. But it is a teaching which is given out, which is transmitted down in a Guru Shishya Parampara in the form of a dialogue. And one of Acharya Shankara's shishyas called Sureshwaracharya, in a wonderful work, a Smriti Grantha that he has written called as Naishkarmya Siddhi, he said, Atma anavabodhat yeva bandhaha, Atma avabodhat yeva muktihi. When I do not understand the reality or the truth or the tattvam of Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, there is bandha. And when I understand the tattva or the reality of Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara, when that avabodha is there, there is nothing but moksha or freedom, which is given in the Guru Shishya Parampara in the form of a dialogue. So now, this should be enough for what is Bhagavad Gita, what is the context of Bhagavad Gita, why is it a Smriti Grantha, how it fits into the Anubandha Chatushtaya way of explaining a Smriti Grantha. Why is it an Upanishad? How does it fall into the very structure of Upanishadic teaching? All this we saw. Now, Dhyana Shlokas are the next important aspect. Dhyana Shlokas were not a part of the original Bhagavad Gita given out by Lord Krishna because it was given out anywhere in the battlefield, anyhow, and it was compiled by Vyasa. Whereas later on, it was seen that if Bhagavan is worshipable, if Bhagavan Krishna is venerable, and we worship Bhagavan Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna's words, Yogeshwara Krishna, Bhagavan Narayana himself who has come and given this knowledge, his words are also equally venerable, equally worshipable, and Bhagavad Gita can be worshipped as an Upasya Devata. Bhagavad Gita, that very body of knowledge, can be worshipped as an upasya. And when you do an upasana on any devata, then there are ways of doing it. There is a method of doing it. We do sankalpa, then we do hridayadi, rishyadi, nyasas, and then, do the puja in a particular way. And Bhagavad Gita also is the recipient of such an upasana. There is a pathakrama of Bhagavad Gita. There is a krama of really doing Bhagavad Gita upasana, taking Bhagavad Gita as the very devata itself. And naturally, in such a situation, if I am doing upasana on Bhagavad Gita, then I should have the dhyanam or dhyana shlokas. As in every upasana, after the sankalpa and after the nyasa, to log on to the devata, to log on to the upasya, I have what are called as the dhyana shlokas. Whether you take Lalita Sahasranam, whether you take Vishnu Sahasranam, whether you take any of the japas, you have a dhyana shloka to log into that particular upasya devata. And these dhyana shlokas of Bhagavad Gita, also called as Gita Dhyanam, are like logging on to Bhagavad Gita when I am doing upasana of Bhagavad Gita. And naturally, as this was not a part of the original Gita or original teaching, this was given by somebody. There are a lot of controversies about who wrote these, and ultimately who wrote this. It is commonly accepted that Acharya Madhusudana Saraswati, in his Bhashyam on Bhagavad Gita, called as Gudartha Deepika, gave these 9 dhyana shlokas, which have glorified Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, Bhagavan Vyasa, Mahabharata itself, and Lord Krishna as Brahman Parameshwara itself. In a bouquet of 9 dhyana shlokas, this is logging on to Bhagavad Gita. And one more question, one more thing I would like to make very clear here, that the vision of Bhagavad Gita, I said earlier, which is given not only by Vyasa in the entire thing, but then how do we know that this is the vision that Bhagavad Gita means? This is the vision of Bhagavan Krishna. How do we know that? We depend entirely on Shankaracharya, Bhagavan Shankaracharya's Bhashya of Bhagavad Gita. That is the most authentic pramana which is being followed by our Guru Parampara, our Parampara also. And whatever explanation is going to be given by me as the vision of Bhagavad Gita, as the interpretation of Bhagavan Krishna's words, will be entirely based on Bhagavan Shankara Bhagavat Pada's commentary or Bhashya. Now let us go to the Dhyana Shlokas given out by Bhagavan Madhusudana Saraswati, and let's go to the first Dhyana Shloka. Now the first Dhyana Shloka glorifies the very Bhagavad Gita itself, because it's the body of knowledge and that is the Upasya. So naturally the Upasya has to be glorified first. It is our tradition to do the stuti or glorify or see the glories of the Upasya Devata. And as Bhagavad Gita's Upasya Devata, the very first Dhyana Shloka is reverentially actually referring to Bhagavad Gita as the very mother. Let us see what it says. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvamanusandadhami Bhagavad-gite Bhavadveshini. So the first verse says, Hey Amba, third line, Hey Amba, Bhagavad-gite, Hey Bhagavad-gite, who are you? You are Bhavadveshini, the one who is going to allow me or take me across the bondage of samsara. Hey Bhagavad-gite, Hey Amba, Hey Bhavadveshini, who are you? You are that knowledge that was given to Arjuna, Partha. Parthaya pratibodhitam. Parthaya. Prithayaha putraha Partha. Kaunteya. Arjuna. Arjuna is also called as Partha. Parthaya. To Partha, you were given in the form of this body of knowledge. By whom? Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam. Narayana himself, in the form of the avatara called as Bhagavan Krishna, Bhagavata, by Bhagavan, Narayanena, by Narayana, Swayam. What a wonderful thing, right? Our gurus are also nothing but the avatars of Bhagavan who are giving us this knowledge. Just like Krishna is an avatara, has given this knowledge. So, Parthaya Pratibodhitam, who Narayanena Swayam, Bhagavata Swayam, okay? Parthaya Pratibodhitam Narayanena Swayam, and who compiled it? Who received this? Vyasena Grathitam. Vyasacharya did the grahanam of this knowledge. He literally caught it, compiled it, made it palatable, distributed the whole thing in a easily assimilable form. Vyasena grathitam. Who's this Vyasa? Purana Munina. Purana Muni. This Vyasa, who is supposed to be a Chiranjeevi, who's supposed to appear in every yuga for a certain purpose, and this Vyasa Purana, ever existing, immortal Vyasa, Purana Munina. Another interpretation is the very same Vyasa who wrote the Puranas, Purana Munina. Purana Munina. And where did this happen? Madhye Mahabharatam, in the middle of the Mahabharatam war. And then, what kind of a knowledge is this? What is it that you are going to bestow upon this Lord Krishna's words which were given to Arjuna and in turn given to us? Hey Amba, hey Bhagavad Gita, what are you going to bestow upon us? Advaitamrita Varshini. You are the Amrita Varshini. Okay, Advaita Amrita Varshini. What is the meaning of Amrita Varshini? You are that very embodiment of Advaita Jnanam, which gives immortality, which gives immortality to me, the mortal individual, the immortal teaching of the Vedas, understanding which, hey Bhagavad Gita, you bestow upon the Jiva the immortality of finding that the Jiva is nothing but this immortal Atma. This teaching, which is given by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, and who are you? You are Advaitamrita Varshini Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim. You are beautifully wrapped up in 18 chapters. You're presented with 18 avayavas as though you are that Amba with 18 avayavas. You are presented by Narayanena Swayam in the form of this knowledge which literally rains immortality on us. But when? Okay? Tvam anusandadhami. When I do the anusandhanam on you, what is the meaning of anusandhanam? When I contemplate upon you, when I'm committed to you learning what you have to give me. What is that Advaita Amrita Jnanam that you're going to give me? I contemplate seriously upon you. See, it is said that mere listening to Bhagavad Gita also gives punya. Chanting Bhagavad Gita also gives punya. That's why Shankaracharya, Bhagavan Acharya Shankaracharya said in Bhajagovindam, Bhagavad Gita Kinchidadita. If not one full entire Bhagavad Gita, chant at least one chapter in a day. If not one chapter, at least one shloka in a day. It will give you punya. But then the ultimate punya of moksha is when I do serious contemplation on the meaning of Bhagavad Gita. So when I chant, when I study the Bhagavad Gita with the very object of understanding the meaning, contemplate on the meaning, which is called as anusandhanam. Okay, tvam anusandadami Bhagavad Gita bhavadveshini. Hey Bhagavad Gita, hey Amba, you are the very Shruti. You are my Hitaishini. You want the best for me. You want me to see and understand and abide in my Moksha Swarupa Atma. And you are ever ready to rain this knowledge of Advaita Amrita. I only need to open up myself to you by Anusandhanam. And who you are given by the very Lord itself. You are the very body of knowledge given by that very Narayana. What else do I need? And let me also do Anusandhanam. See the vision which you are going to present, the way you are presenting this vision, with the help of bhashyas like Acharya Shankaras, which open our eyes, which open our minds, which open our intellects to the tattvam of Bhagavad Gita. Let me do this kind of an anusandhanam, using my guru's words, using the help of my gurus, using the help of gurus like Acharya Shankara, using their works. Let me do anusandhanam on you, hey mother, so that you can be a hitaishini to me and take me across this bondage of samsara and make me see what this moksha is, and make me understand that the problem was I, the solution was I. The problem was in me, the solution was in me. And that is what Krishna told Arjuna. You don't have to look outside for answers, Arjuna. Your kripanata, your shoka, your moha is all in you, and you have to find the answer in yourself. And Bhagavad Gita Anusandhanam is what and how Lord Krishna helped Arjuna in crossing this samsara of bondage. Let's see all the other dhyana shlokas in the next class. नन्दन्तु साधका सर्वे विनश्यन्तु विदूषकाः अवस्थाशाम्भवी मेस्तु प्रसन्नोऽस्तु गुरुः सदा सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।